The Wendigo, a legend born of hunger and winter, the thing that should not exist. There are stories that survive because they entertain us, and then there are stories that survive because they warn us. The Wendigo belongs to the second kind. It's a legend so terrifying, so deeply woven into the fabric of survival and spiritual lore, that to speak its name in certain communities is still considered dangerous, an invitation to something that should remain forgotten. Imagine the coldest winter night you've ever experienced. Now, multiply that cold by 10. Strip away the walls, the heat, the grocery stores. Leave only endless forest, snow that swallows sound, and darkness so complete you can't see your own hand. This is where the Wendigo lives, in the places where civilization ends and ancient hunger begins. But the Wendigo isn't just a monster hiding in the woods. It's something far more horrifying. It's what we become when we lose our humanity. To understand the Wendigo, you must first understand the land that birthed this legend. The vast boreal forests stretching across what we now call Canada and the northern United States. The Great Lakes region, the territories of the Algonquian, Cree, Ojibwe, and other Algonquian-speaking peoples who have called these unforgiving lands home for thousands of years. This is not gentle wilderness. These northern forests are a world of extremes. Summer brings clouds of black flies so thick they can suffocate a man. But it's winter that truly tests the soul. Temperatures plunge to 40, 50, even 60 degrees below zero. The sun barely crests the horizon. Snow falls in walls, burying everything in white silence. And when the wind howls through the pines, that's when the old ones would fall quiet and listen, because they knew some winds carry voices that don't belong to the living. In this landscape, the Algonquian peoples developed one of the most sophisticated survival cultures on Earth. They understood the delicate balance between human and nature, between taking what you need and taking too much. They had laws, spiritual laws, that governed behavior, especially during the starvation moons of late winter, when food stores dwindled and the next hunt might mean the difference between life and death. And they had a warning, embodied in flesh and legend: the Wendigo. The earliest stories say it begins with hunger, not ordinary hunger, the kind you feel when you've skipped lunch. This is the hunger that comes after weeks without food, when the body begins consuming itself, when rational thought dissolves into animal desperation. This is the hunger that makes the impossible seem reasonable. In Cree oral tradition, the story is often told like this. A hunter becomes separated from his band during a brutal winter. Days pass. His supplies run out. He eats his boots, tree bark, anything. The cold gnaws at his mind as relentlessly as the hunger gnaws at his belly. And then he finds something he shouldn't. Another traveler, frozen and dead. At first, he walks past. He knows the law. Cannibalism is the ultimate taboo, the one act that severs you from humanity, from the natural order, from the Creator's grace. But the hunger whispers, it argues, it screams. And eventually, in a moment of weakness, he partakes of the forbidden meal. Those who have survived encounters, and yes, there are recorded accounts, describe something that defies natural law. The Wendigo grows, stretching taller and taller, sometimes reaching heights of 15 or even 20 feet. Its skin pulls tight over elongated bones, gray or pale as winter frost, stretched so thin you can see the skeletal structure beneath. The lips according to Ojibwe tradition, are often torn or missing entirely, revealing jagged teeth and bloody gums in a permanent expression of ravenous hunger. But it's the eyes that people remember most. Some say they glow like coals. Others say they're empty, reflecting nothing. No light, no soul, no recognition of the human it once was. And the smell, witnesses across different tribes and time periods mention a stench of decay, of rotting meat, and frozen death that precedes the creature. The Wendigo moves through the forest with impossible speed, gliding over snow that would bog down any natural creature. It hunts constantly, driven by a hunger that can never be satisfied. And here's the truly terrifying part. The more it eats, the larger it grows, and the larger it grows, the hungrier it becomes. An eternal cycle of consumption and growth. A metaphor made flesh. In some accounts, particularly those from Algonquian elders, the Wendigo is said to have a heart of ice, literally a frozen organ that animates its corrupted body. To kill a Wendigo, according to these traditions, you must either melt or shatter that frozen heart, often through fire or by striking the chest with silver or blessed weapons. But even approaching close enough to attempt this requires courage most don't possess. But ask any keeper of these traditions, and they'll tell you, the Wendigo is not simply a campfire story meant to frighten children. It's a teaching tool, a cultural safeguard encoded in the most powerful form humans know, narrative. In Algonquian worldview, all things exist in balance. The natural world is not something to conquer, but something to participate in, respectfully and carefully. The community survives by sharing, by moderation, by placing collective well-being above individual desire. The Wendigo represents the opposite of these values: unchecked greed, selfish consumption, and the isolation that comes from breaking communal bonds. Dr. Nathan Carlson, an anthropologist who has studied Algonquian folklore, noted in his research that Wendigo psychosis was a recognized phenomenon among northern Algonquian peoples. Individuals would become convinced they were transforming into a Wendigo, exhibiting symptoms of paranoia, violent urges toward cannibalism, and deep psychological distress. Whether this was a culture-bound syndrome, a response to extreme isolation and starvation, or something else entirely remains debated. But what's undeniable is that the community took these cases with absolute seriousness. There are documented cases recorded by Jesuit missionaries and fur traders in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries of individuals who claimed to be undergoing Wendigo transformation, being executed by their own communities, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity and mercy. Better to die human than complete the transformation into something that would threaten the entire band. Another account comes from 1907, when a Cree hunter named Jack Fiddler, renowned as a shaman and Wendigo killer, was arrested for murder. Fiddler claimed he had killed over 14 Wendigos during his lifetime, protecting his community from those who showed signs of transformation. To outsiders, these were murders. To his people, they were acts of protection, mercy, and spiritual duty. Fiddler died in custody before trial, and his story remains one of the most controversial intersections between indigenous spiritual law and colonial justice. These weren't metaphorical cases to the communities involved. They were real, immediate threats that required action. Among the Ojibwe bands that traveled the shores of Lake Superior, there's a particular story that encapsulates the Wendigo legend. It varies in details depending on the storyteller, but the core remains consistent. During a winter in the time before the Europeans came, a respected hunter named Mahingan became separated from his family band during an early season storm. He took shelter in a cave, expecting to wait out the weather and rejoin them within days. But the storm didn't stop. It continued for weeks, burying the forest in snow higher than a man's head. Mahingan's supplies vanished. He ventured out during breaks in the wind, finding nothing. No deer, no rabbit tracks, not even the sign of a winter grouse. The spirits of the forest seemed to have abandoned the land entirely. As the days became weeks, Mahingan felt something changing inside himself. The hunger wasn't just in his belly anymore. It was in his thoughts, his dreams, his waking visions. One night, as he huddled near his failing fire, he heard a voice in the wind. It spoke in the old language, but the words were wrong, distorted, promising satisfaction, urging him to embrace what he'd been denying. And then he saw it. A figure at the mouth of the cave, impossibly tall, skeletal, with eyes that reflected his firelight like an animal's. But when the figure spoke again, Mahingan realized with horror it was using his voice. The Wendigo hadn't come to kill him. It had come to claim him because he was already transforming. The isolation, the hunger, the breaking point of his spirit. He'd crossed a threshold without realizing it. In that moment, Mahingan understood that he had two choices: complete the transformation and doom himself to eternal hunger, or end his own life while he was still human enough to make that choice. Different versions of the story give different endings. In some, Mahingan throws himself from a cliff, choosing death over damnation. In others, he's found by his family just in time, pulled back from the edge through love and ceremony. But in the darkest tellings, the ones shared late at night by those who claim to know the true version, Mahingan makes the wrong choice. And on certain winter nights near Lake Superior, hunters still report seeing an impossibly tall figure moving through the trees, still searching, still hungry, still trapped in the winter that never ended. So why has this legend survived? Why does the Wendigo still appear in books, films, video games, and cultural consciousness today? Because the warning is still relevant. The Wendigo isn't just a forest demon anymore. It's a mirror. The Algonquian peoples understood something fundamental. The natural world operates on balance, and human society must do the same. Take only what you need. Share what you have. Maintain connection with your community. Break these laws, especially during times of scarcity, and you risk not just physical death, but spiritual corruption. In Cree philosophy, there's a concept called wetiko, another name for Wendigo, a psychosis of selfishness, a cannibal consciousness that makes you see other beings as objects to consume for your benefit. Sound familiar? It should. It's playing out on global scales. Climate change, driven by insatiable consumption. Economic systems built on infinite growth in a finite world. The epidemic of loneliness and isolation in hyper-connected societies. We may not transform into 10-foot-tall skeletal monsters with hearts of ice, but the metaphor still holds. When we lose our connection to community and nature, when we take more than we need, when we let hunger for money, power, attention, whatever, override our humanity, we become something less than human, something that can never be satisfied. The elders say you should never speak the Wendigo's name carelessly, especially not in winter, especially not in the deep forest, because some things persist in this world, not as flesh and bone, but as hunger and warning. And once you name something, you give it power. But perhaps the greater danger isn't speaking the name, it's forgetting the lesson. The Wendigo legend has survived centuries of colonization, cultural suppression, and modernization because it speaks to something true about human nature. We all have the capacity to become monsters when we forget our connections, when we let hunger, whatever form it takes, override our humanity. The next time you feel that gnawing emptiness, that voice telling you to take more, consume more, that others are just obstacles or resources for your own satisfaction, pause. Listen to what the old stories are trying to teach us. The Wendigo is always hungry. The question is, will you feed it, or will you remember what it means to be human? Because in the end, the most terrifying thing about the Wendigo isn't that it exists somewhere out there in the darkness of the northern forests. It's that it exists in here, in the hunger we carry, in the choices we make when we think no one is watching. The winter is long, the forest is deep, and the Wendigo is always, always waiting. Will you hear its voice in the wind? If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe below, and we'll see you next time.